There we go. Good morning all. I'm in the hard spot between here and coffee, so we'll keep this brief and get on with it. I know you don't necessarily just want to hear from me. It's all about the coffee and biscuits. So a couple of things to really talk about here. So I'm privileged to have been involved in FinTech Australia from sort of day dot and privileged enough to be chair now. And the thing for me and the focus is really around, we're doing a lot of innovation. We're doing a lot of great things, but is that really enough? Have we moved the dial? And so what that sort of gets to is where is it we've come from? So from 2017, it was a turning point for FinTech in Australia. We look at the EY FinTech Adoption Index. This is something that's been around for a little while, a few months, but Australia sort of ranks ahead of a lot of important sort of countries in terms of the adoption of consumers, whether it's retail consumers or business consumers using FinTech. And that's really important. And what's most important here is the accomplishment of the gap, 13% to 37%. That's 1 in 3. That's pretty huge. Are we calling the mic? All right, there we go. Is that better if I pull that out, or do you want me there? That's easy. We'll go like that. Excellent. So that's huge. But then if we now look at what's happening from the FinTech census, and we look at, from the startup muster, you see that FinTechs now make up 1/5 of all startups. So consumers are using more FinTech. There's more of us and more of us in startups. But equally, what we also see is that FinTechs as a whole are maturing. We now have close to 80% of FinTechs that have been around for over 2 years. What we also then know is that the median revenue is increased a bit over 3 times. That's a 200% increase. So as an industry, we should all sort of sit here and say we're doing incredibly well. FinTechs are going well, we're dominating, we're crushing it, it's onward and upward, and that's a great message. But then I'd posit, despite our best efforts, can we actually say that we've delivered better customer outcomes? Have we actually shifted the dial on the industry? And what is it that we need to do to be able to bring the rest of the financial services industry along with us? If you look at the ME Bank Household Financial Comfort Report that came out a month ago, and these guys do a really good report on this, 63% of Australians could not easily raise $3,000 in an emergency. And then equally, 59% of Australians spend all their income or more. And the breakout of that is 51% of Australians spend what they get that month. 8% of Australians are actually going backwards. They're going into debt. They're not actually affording their lifestyle. So what is it that we as an industry need to be able to do to be able to deal with this type of an issue? From a pricing perspective, what we see is that consumer loans and credit card spreads basically been at an all-time high for the last 25, 30 years. We're seeing that these spreads have in fact doubled. Now we're starting to make an impact on that, both the small business lenders and the consumer lenders, but there's a long way to go as we get more mainstream penetration. From a business perspective and from CPA Australia's sort of studies, we see that the number or proportion of small businesses that can't easily access finance is increased. And this is after Noah's intro earlier on and the great efforts that our small business lenders are making. But it's becoming harder for Australian consumers. It's becoming harder for Australian businesses. So what is it that we need to do here? For any bankers in the room, just pause for a second. So that's Rowena Orr, for those of you who've been following the Royal Commission. I have delighted in watching and reading about Rowena's commentary and comments and absolute grilling of bank executives. Wake up in the morning, it's like, do I look at my Kardashian Twitter feed or do I look at what happened in the Royal Commission? But what this gets to is you look at what's been called out in the Royal Commission, you look at what's sort of happening there, and it gets to an underlying lack of confidence, an underlying lack of trust in traditional financial services providers. So what is this? This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us as an industry to be able to step up, to be able to actually take that and to be able to continue the great work that we're doing, the great customer outcomes and great benefits that we have, and to be able to deliver those to customers as we become more mainstream. So what is the focus and the priority for FinTech Australia this year in 2018? It's pretty straightforward. It's open banking. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to redefine how financial services is delivered to Australian customers, whether it's a consumer, a retail customer, whether it's a small business, and it extends beyond banking.
it's superannuation, it's insurance, it's all aspects of financial services. Now, this is an opportunity that we have as an industry, collectively as an industry, a financial services industry, where fintechs are taking the lead. Now, there's been some commentary from some of the major banks about how this is really hard and this is really, really challenging, and that we can't do all data at the same time, and that we have complex systems that have been in place that are programmed in things like COBOL, which is something most of the people in the room wouldn't understand what that is. But I would posit, if you're going to call yourself out as being a 200-year-old startup, you sure as hell can deliver on something like open banking pretty quickly. And why it's important is because ultimately this is what is needed to deliver better customer outcomes for all Australians. From a responsible lending perspective, it enables lenders to be able to deliver better value, but most importantly, to be able to deliver the right product to customers. But also more broadly, it leads to better customer outcomes, all centered in the basic principle that the customer is at the center of this. Show of hands, who actually is aware that there was a Farrell review into open banking? It's a really active, engaged audience. All right, keep your hand up if you downloaded the report. Keep your hand up if you read the exec sum. Keep your hand up if you read the whole report. All right, the hands go down there. I'll let Scott know he needs to make a punchier. The whole focus of Scott's paper was it's about customer. There are a bunch of other things that talk about competition, talks about innovation, talks about that. What open banking is about is it's about customer. And so these are sort of the 6 points that we're focused on at FinTech Australia. And it's about how do we actually take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to improve financial services. We need to increase data sets. So the initial sort of feedback from banks, it's too hard, let's start with deposits and then we'll do some stuff over 3 years and maybe we'll get somewhere. Major banks have spent the last 10 years on comprehensive credit reporting. It wasn't until RateSetter and then MoneyPlace and then a few others came to market and participated in CCR. Then we caught the ear of the Treasurer. It then got mandated. No, look at that, the banks can now participate in CCR. It's amazing what happens when you make something a priority. Equally, we need to make sure that doesn't happen with open banking. This is an opportunity for us today, this is an opportunity for us now. It's not something that needs to happen over the next 10 years. Deposits and lending products are incredibly important around responsible lending, as I sort of touched on before. And it's from a customer outcome perspective, not just in terms of a better price, not just in terms of a better product, but should a customer actually get a loan? It's great to be able to talk about access, and it's great to be able to talk about the ability to get a loan. What's fascinating, though, is this perception that there's a universal right to debt. No, I'm sorry, there's not a universal right to debt. We need to lend responsibly. We need to make sure that our small businesses and our Australian borrowers, whether it's a personal loan, credit card or mortgage, is lent appropriately. In terms of more data, the claim has been made that more data sets is going to take more time. No, that's not true. It's an API. Just write it and run it. So the red bank up here, that's a 200-year-old startup, your mate, the blue bank down in Victoria, has got a whole bunch of T-shirts for his team that are called Agile that he's handed out. These guys can move on this. You can move fast. What it essentially is a delaying tactic to be able to reduce competition. And what that gets to is the fact that open banking truly is transformational. We've innovated, we've iterated, but what this is an opportunity to actually transform financial services. And what we've seen is that guys like Macquarie are already doing it. Guys like NAB have already opened up APIs and doing some amazing things. So this is possible and this is achievable. And why it is so critical and so important that we do this now and we do this quickly is this is about giving Australian financial institutions, fintechs included, a competitive advantage. The UK had a bunch of missteps around how they launched open banking and what they did there. First of all, they started out making it bank-centric and not customer-centric. Scott and his reviewers addressed this. But by actually bringing it forward, bringing it now and here and making it accessible is the opportunity that we have to help transform financial services and to be able to create better customer outcomes. Thank you.